I woke up inside a novel, trapped in the body of the villainous supporting character. Right now, the leading lady, Ava, is busy trying to convince the hero, Ethan, to take the fall and go to prison in my place. She is even making a solemn vow to marry him the second he finishes his sentence. That same night, I haul my bike over to the local precinct in Manhattan to turn myself in. I was not playing around at all. There was no way I was letting myself get dragged into this brainless soap opera where nobody seems to understand how the law works. Seriously, Ava, the way your mind works is terrifying. It is almost like you have a death wish to end up behind bars. As I regained consciousness, I could hear a man and a woman arguing just outside my bedroom door. "If you just take the rap for James and serve 5 years, I promise I will marry you," she said. Suddenly, a flood of foreign memories crashed into my brain, and it hit me that I had been transported into one of those trashy romance novels about billionaire dynasties. To make matters worse, I was the resident antagonist. My name was James Harrison, your textbook wealthy elite, and I had grown up right alongside Ava Sterling. Apparently, I had been her first love and the man of her dreams since we were kids. In the original plot, I had been driving drunk one night and hit a pedestrian. To keep me out of trouble, Ava manipulated the protagonist, Ethan Brooks, into taking the blame and serving a 5-year sentence. In return, she gave him her word that she would be waiting at the altar when he got out. However, 5 years later, all she found waiting for her was a cold grave. A devastated Ava finally had her late realization, discovering that Ethan was the one she truly loved all along. Later at a gala, she ran into a man who bore a striking resemblance to Ethan. It was only then she discovered that Ethan had faked his death just to get as far away from her toxic influence as possible. Amidst her shock and rage, Ava felt a twisted sense of joy she could barely admit to herself. Their reunion reignited a dark and distorted passion that should have stayed buried. This messy, toxic entanglement was overflowing with complicated emotions and unresolved baggage. As for me, I was nothing more than a plot device in their romance, a stepping stone destined to be crushed under their feet. After I caused a string of disasters, Ava would eventually have her epiphany, and I would be tossed aside like trash for everyone to mock. My ending was supposed to be absolutely pathetic. I was basically the world's biggest tragic clown. I bolted out of bed and rushed to the door to peek outside. 2 figures were standing in the hallway, Ethan looking tall and gaunt, and Ava looking perfectly elegant as always. Ethan's eyes were bloodshot as he forced a bitter smile at Ava. "This is what you want, right? Fine, I will do it." My stomach dropped. I wanted to scream at him not to do it. This was literally a crime. I wondered if either of them understood what obstruction of justice actually meant. Suddenly, Ava sensed someone watching and turned toward me with a face full of manufactured concern. "James, what are you doing out of bed? You are still recovering, so please go back and lie down." Ethan just stood there staring at us, looking completely dazed. I forced a smile and braced myself. I just remembered that I left something important in my car, and I need to go grab it right now. In the original story, I was supposed to be paralyzed with fear after the hit and run. My first instinct was to flee to Ava for help, and the author even had me fainting from pure cowardice. Honestly, this character was such a loser. Ava hesitated for a second and asked, "What is it?" "I can just have one of the staff go get it for you." "It is something personal and very important," I said, putting on my best act of being distressed. "I won't be able to rest until I get it myself." Ava probably thought I was panicked about leaving evidence in the car, so she eventually gave me a nod. I bolted out the door, jumped on my bike, and pedaled like a madman toward the nearest precinct in Queens. There were 2 officers on duty who looked up as I stumbled in. Seeing how frantic I was, one of them asked what the problem was. I was so out of breath that I could barely get the words out. "I'm here to turn myself in," I managed to gasp. Their expressions immediately turned grave as I started explaining exactly what had happened from start to finish. I had some beer and ended up hitting someone with my car, then I panicked and drove off. I realized almost immediately how wrong that was, so I called 911 while heading back. "I don't know how badly they're hurt, so you guys need to get someone over there right away." I spilled everything like a leaky faucet, not even bothering to sugarcoat my mistakes. I even rolled up my sleeve and held out my arm. And you should probably draw my blood for a sobriety test right now, while the clock is ticking. The two officers just stared at each other in silence for a moment. I guess my level of cooperation was enough to make me a poster child for model citizens turning themselves in. They didn't waste any time taking me into custody and dispatching a unit to the scene of the accident. I finally collapsed into a plastic chair and let out a massive sigh of relief. I just hoped the victim was going to be okay. Just then, my phone started buzzing with a call from Ava. "James, where are you? Is everything okay?" I cleared my throat before answering. "Look, I have been thinking about this, and it was entirely my fault. I am at the police station turning myself in right now." "You did what?" Ava shrieked, her voice full of disbelief. "I'm busy with the officers right now, so I have to go," I muttered before hanging up on her without a second thought. In the original timeline, James had only been back in the States for a few months. He had been annoyed to find that Ava, who used to worship him, now had this guy Ethan hanging around her. Ava actually seemed to care about the guy, which made James incredibly jealous. He had doused himself in bourbon and faked being wasted just to see how she would react, even though he had only actually taken a couple of swallows. My blood alcohol level was actually well below the legal limit for a DUI. More importantly, the person I hit hadn't even been seriously hurt. It was mostly just a few scratches and a bruised ego. In the book, James had actually panicked but didn't run away immediately. He had stopped to check on the guy only to realize the victim already had a pre-existing fracture. His little fender bender had barely done any additional damage. James had seen an opportunity and promised the guy a massive payout if he agreed to a little scheme. He wanted the man to help him put on a performance for Ava. He set the whole thing up specifically so Ava would be the one to ask Ethan to go to jail for him. That way, Ethan would have a permanent criminal record hanging over his head forever. It was designed to completely destroy their relationship while getting rid of his rival. He really thought he was being clever by killing two birds with one stone. James was convinced that 5 years would be more than enough time to manipulate Ava into forgetting Ethan and coming back to him. I had already made a deal with the victim before the cops arrived. I told him he would still get his money, but only if he told the absolute truth about his injuries. Based on the timing, the guy should be at the hospital right now, getting a full workup. I made sure they sent him to the same clinic where he had his original fracture treated. Ava came rushing into the station, acting every bit like the spoiled socialite she was. She managed to smooth talk the officer guarding me just long enough to get a private moment. "James, you are being so reckless," she hissed, her eyes wide with panic. "You are already sick, and now, with this legal mess, what are we going to do about your transplant?" Transplant. I blanked for a second before the memory hit me like a ton of bricks. Damn it, I had completely forgotten about that part of the plot. In the original book, before Ethan even went to prison, Ava had basically forced him to donate a kidney to me for a transplant. She claimed I was an end-stage renal failure and needed a new kidney to survive. The catch was that the entire diagnosis was a total lie made up by James. The whole point was to trick Ava into personally destroying Ethan. This kidney theft was exactly what motivated Ethan to eventually fake his own death just to get away from her. Without that dramatic betrayal, the rest of the story about unrequited love and fall from grace wouldn't even make sense. The original James had everything planned out perfectly, but there was one major problem. I wasn't that James anymore. Just thinking about the hero's kidney being ripped out for my sake made my own stomach turn. I felt a phantom pain just imagining it. I looked at Ava and tried to fix the situation. Actually, I was going to tell you that once this police stuff is settled, I want to get a second opinion at a different hospital. What if it turns out my first doctor just got it wrong? I suggested. Ava bit her lip and then suddenly threw herself into my arms, her eyes brimming with tears. "James, I know it is hard to process, but don't be scared. No matter what, I am never leaving your side." Her words literally made my skin crawl. Seriously, she was in bed with Ethan yesterday, and now she was clinging to me today. I was exhausted just watching her flip-flop between us. I kept my cool and gently disentangled myself from her grip. Let's just slow down and see what the doctors say first. By the way, where's Ethan? I thought he was with you." At the mention of his name, Ava looked visibly annoyed and snapped. "Don't even bring him up." That wasn't surprising at all. No guy in his right mind would want to watch the girl he loves fawn all over another man. Actually, this was probably for the best. Maybe it would help him realize sooner rather than later that Ava was a walking red flag. His best move was to get out of this toxic situation as fast as he could. I told Ava, "Look, just stay here with me while we wait for the police to finish their report." I was mostly trying to keep her away from Ethan, so she couldn't manipulate him further. Ava didn't put up a fight because her biggest fear at the moment was me actually ending up behind bars. A few minutes later, she stepped outside to make some calls. I watched her through the glass as she paced the sidewalk, her face tight with anxiety. I yawned, knowing she was probably calling every high-powered contact she had. Unfortunately for her, none of that was going to work. Even in a trashy novel, being a rich heiress didn't make you God. If she really had that much power, Ethan wouldn't have spent 5 years in a cell in the original story. Plus, without the original James intentionally making things worse, this accident was really just a minor fender bender. It wasn't exactly the crime of the century. Everything went exactly as I planned. The medical report came back showing the victim had nothing but 2 small bruises, and that fracture was clearly an old injury that had nothing to do with me. Since my blood alcohol level was negligible, they couldn't even charge me with a DUI. I ended up with some points on my license, a temporary suspension, and a $2,000 fine. I was perfectly fine with that outcome. I had more than enough money to cover the fine, and I could always just hire a private driver to take me around the city. The best part was that Ethan was no longer on the hook for a prison sentence. Ava, however, looked completely baffled by the light sentence, her forehead creasing with confusion. To keep her from getting suspicious, I offered an explanation. "I didn't actually drink that much, Ava. I just spilled some on my clothes so I would look more wasted than I was. It is a lucky thing the guy was barely hurt, or I would be in real trouble," I added. If things had gone differently, I would have been looking at serious jail time. The suspicion in her eyes finally faded, and she leaned her head against my shoulder. "I'm just glad you're safe, James. I was terrified when you showed up at my door that night." I caught myself from rolling my eyes. For someone so supposedly fragile, she sure was quick to jump into a criminal conspiracy. I still had to play the part of the arrogant rich kid, so I kept my tone casual. "Anyway, I want you to come with me to the hospital for that follow-up appointment." The original James had faked the whole kidney failure diagnosis, so I just needed a real doctor to give me a clean bill of health to put that lie to bed. "Of course, let's go right now," Ava agreed, reaching for her phone. She was probably already planning to book out an entire private wing at some elite clinic. I stopped her immediately, keeping my voice firm. "Let's not make a scene, Ava. I just want to go to the NYU Medical Center and get this done quietly." Ava made a face. "Those public hospitals are always so crowded and loud. It's not the right environment for you to recover." I bit my tongue before I could argue with her. She clearly had no idea that those major teaching hospitals had better equipment and doctors than any boutique clinic in the city. "It is just a quick checkup, not a long-term stay," I insisted. Seeing that I wasn't going to budge, she finally gave in and drove me over there. I didn't expect to run into Ethan in the hallway. He was carrying a small cooler bag and had massive dark circles under his eyes, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Even at his worst, the guy still looked like a movie star. He had that effortless leading man charisma that was honestly kind of annoying. Ethan spotted us immediately, his eyes flickering with a moment of raw emotion before he masked it behind a cold, neutral expression. Just as we were about to walk past him, Ava stopped him. "Ethan, what on earth are you doing here?" Ethan didn't even slow down as he replied, "None of your business." His icy tone clearly stung her pride. She was about to snap back when a young woman in a white doctor's coat started walking toward us from the far end of the hall. "Ethan, what took you so long?" the woman asked. She had a kind, graceful face and carried herself with a sense of calm that felt like a breath of fresh air. She stepped up beside Ethan, her eyes filled with genuine concern before she glanced briefly at Ava and me. "Are these friends of yours?" she inquired. "Never seen them before. Let's go." Ethan said coldly. I glanced at Ava and could practically see the green-eyed monster clawing at her heart. She looked like she wanted to burn a hole through their backs with her eyes. If I weren't standing right there, I'm sure she would have caused a scene right in the middle of the hospital. It clicked for me right then that the woman was Maria Foster. She had been Ethan's mentor in college, a brilliant medical student who had been head over heels for him since the day they met. She was the one who stayed by his side through everything, and she was the mastermind who eventually helped him fake his death to escape Ava's clutches. This must be the part where Ethan's mother has a heart attack, and he has to rush her to the ER. Ethan really had a rough life from the start. His father was a gambling addict who ran up massive debts before disappearing and leaving Ethan to deal with the wreckage of their lives. Ava had paid off those debts, but she basically treated him like a piece of property she could order around whenever she felt like it. Ethan had essentially sold his soul to her just to survive. Despite the toxicity, Ethan had actually fallen for her over the next 4 years. It was hard not to, given how stunning and charismatic she could be when she wanted something. It wasn't until Ava asked him to take the rap for me that he finally saw her for who she really was. He realized he had been a fool to think she actually cared about him. Ava was completely oblivious to his inner turmoil. She just thought he was so obsessed with her that he would willingly go to prison just to earn her hand in marriage. In her mind, promising to marry him was the ultimate prize. While Ethan was supposed to be in prison, Maria Foster was the one actually looking after his sick mother. Sadly, his mother passed away right before he was supposed to be released, which turned his love for Ava into a deep, burning hatred. I have no idea how the author of this book managed to force a happy ending out of such a miserable story. It's truly bizarre. Since I had derailed the plot, the timeline was already shifting. Ava and Maria were meeting months earlier than they were ever supposed to. Judging by the tension, it felt like a bomb was about to go off between them. I could practically hear Ava's teeth grinding from across the room. She probably didn't even realize she was being jealous yet. But seriously, why did she have to be upset? Ethan's mother was literally fighting for her life in the ICU, and Ava was only worried about her own ego. There was no way she could ever compete with someone as selfless as Maria. Maria was the one who had been Ethan's rock for years. Honestly, Maria was leagues ahead of Ava in every way that mattered. Ava, I said, snapping her out of her trance. She quickly composed herself and said, Come on, let's go get your results. Just as I thought, my blood work and scans were perfectly clean. I let out a long, relieved breath. Thank God Ethan still had both of his kidneys exactly where they belonged. Ava, however, looked miserable despite the good news. She had been in a daze ever since we left the doctor's office, clearly still obsessing over Ethan. She wasn't there for him when he needed her, but now that he was moving on, she couldn't stand it. I didn't get a chance to ask him why he was here, I said casually. Do you want to head back and check on him? Ava's expression turned icy as she snapped. We aren't that close, James. His life has nothing to do with me. I practically wanted to give her a standing ovation for that level of hypocrisy. It was a masterclass in lying to yourself. She had Ethan right there and couldn't even manage a kind word. Was she just saving her breath for more petty jealousy? Honestly, if it weren't for her, Ethan wouldn't have been in this mess to begin with. Seeing Maria with Ethan must have really gotten under her skin. Ava couldn't wait to get out of that hospital, practically dragging me toward the exit. As soon as I dropped her off, I circled back to the hospital to find Ethan. He looked genuinely shocked to see me again so soon. Are you actually looking for me, James? I decided to get straight to the point. Are you in need of cash? Ethan's face went from tired to cold in a split second. I get it now, he said flatly. He probably thought I was there to finish what Ava started. To him, James Harrison was just another entitled prick trying to buy his way out of trouble. I looked over at his sleeping mother and signaled for him to step out into the hall. He hesitated for a second before following me out of the room. Your mom needs surgery, doesn't she? I asked. The operation and the recovery are going to be expensive. I pressed a Chase debit card into his hand. There should be enough in there to cover everything. Ethan didn't take the card. He narrowed his eyes and asked, What is the catch? You want me to stay away from Ava? I laughed. Not quite. I actually want to offer you a job at my firm. Ethan looked at me like I was speaking a different language. Wait, what? I saw your portfolio from the School of Visual Arts, I told him. Your work is incredible, and I need a lead designer. If you take the job, that money is just an advance on your salary. Ethan was a natural talent in the design world. In any other story, he would have been a superstar right out of college. Instead, the original James had ruined his life and sent him to prison. In the original book, it took him 5 years and a fake identity to finally make it as a top executive. By the time he reconnected with Ava in the book, he was a different man. He was basically a blue-chip stock waiting to explode, and I would be an idiot not to invest in him now. Ethan looked conflicted. So, you just trying to buy my designs? He asked. Something about his tone fell off. He stared at the card for a long time before taking a deep breath. Fine, I will do it, he said. For the next year. You can put your name on everything I create. My heart sank as I realized I had overlooked a major plot point. In the novel, James was notoriously jealous of Ethan's raw talent. He had actually hired someone to steal Ethan's portfolio and entered it into a major national competition under his own name. He had won the top prize just last month while Ethan got nothing. Ethan had tried to tell Ava, but she had dismissed him, calling him petty and paranoid. That fight had nearly ended their relationship right then and there. No wonder he was so defensive about the job offer. I quickly tried to clear the air. Wait, you have it all wrong. That is not what I am after. I am actually hiring you for your talent. Every single thing you design will have your name on it. About the competition, I know I messed up, and I am truly sorry for that. I will give you every cent of that prize money. And if that isn't enough, I can give you equity in the firm, I added. Seriously, this guy was going to be a titan of industry one day, and I wanted him on my side. Being in business with him was a guaranteed goldmine. Ethan probably thought I'd lost my mind, but he was desperate for the money and didn't push it. He finally gave me a slow nod. I handed him the card, and we had ourselves a deal. I felt like I was walking on air as I left the hospital. Not only had I fixed my karma, but I had just secured my financial future. Most importantly, if Ava ever tried to come after me again, she would have to think twice. Being a wealthy, good-looking, single bachelor in New York sounded like a pretty great way to live. I was feeling so good that I called on my inner circle to grab some drinks. Hey, James, where is Ava tonight? One of my buddies asked with a grin. I can't believe she let you out of her sight for 10 minutes, he continued. I swirled my drink and laughed. She is busy, and besides, she is a total buzzkill at parties like this. Man, half the guys in this city would kill for a date with her. And here you are avoiding her like the plague, another friend added, sounding a little jealous. I just laughed to myself. They had no idea that Ava's heart was already starting to drift toward Ethan. A girl like Ava is all sweetness until she decides to ruin you. Being her favorite person isn't a blessing. It is more like a curse wrapped in a designer bow. Just then, one of the guys came back from the restroom and slumped into the booth with a look of pure gossip on his face. James, you're not going to believe who I just saw downstairs. Who was it? I asked. Ethan Brooks, he said with a smirk. I froze. What? What is he doing at a place like this? Take a guess, he snorted. He probably got dumped by Ava. I bet he thought it was real, but she was obviously just playing around with him. He is probably still holding on to some pathetic fantasy, he continued, handing me a cigarette. To her, the guy is literally nothing. Some charity case thinking he can compete with you for Ava's attention, he said, trying to suck up to me. He clearly doesn't know who he is dealing with. Everyone knew Ava usually followed my lead without question, but for some reason, hearing them trash Ethan made me feel uneasy. I pushed his lighter away and stood up. I'm going to go check it out, I said, stepping out of the VIP lounge and looking over the railing at the main floor. I spotted Ethan immediately. This was an exclusive club in Soho where only the VIPs had access to the upper levels while the main floor was open to the members. Ethan was clearly being cornered by some cougar in her 40s who looked like she wanted to eat him alive. She was clearly tipsy as she leaned in close. Come on, Ethan, we've known each other for years. At least have one drink with me, for old time's sake. Ethan looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Back when he was desperate to pay off his father's debts, he had worked a short stint here as a high-end host. He had quit as soon as he started seeing Ava, but now the word was out that I was back, and Ava had kicked him to the curb. All the wealthy socialites who had been eyeing him for years were circling like sharks again. I was about to head down when I heard a familiar, mocking voice from the shadows. "Aren't you going to go save your little pet, Ava?" a voice asked. I froze. Ava was actually there. She was dressed to the nines in a designer gown, looking every bit the high society heiress. She was accompanied by a man who looked like some corporate executive. Ava never used to go to these events without Ethan on her arm. Tonight, she was in the VIP section while Ethan was being harassed on the floor below. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on. Ava had clearly discarded him. Otherwise, the guy she was with wouldn't have had the nerve to make that comment. Suddenly, someone from the main floor looked up and yelled, "Look, it's Miss Sterling." Every head in the room turned toward the balcony. Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting Ava's before landing directly on me. His expression darkened immediately. I felt like a deer in the headlights because this entire scene had never happened in the book. In the original story, Ethan was supposed to be in a holding cell awaiting trial. He shouldn't have even been here, let alone caught in the middle of this disaster. I had no idea how to handle this. Before I could move, Ava called out my name. "James!" I was caught off guard. I thought I was being discreet, but she spotted me instantly. It was especially awkward since I'd told her I was staying in for the night. I never expected to run into her here. Before I could even come up with an excuse, she was already heading my way. I forced a polite smile. "Some friends dragged me out for a last-minute drink, and I didn't get a chance to call you. I hope you don't mind." The coldness on her face vanished instantly, replaced by a warm, performative smile. She tilted her head and gave me a sugary sweet look. "Of course I don't mind, honey." I realized right then that she was putting on a show for Ethan's benefit. Ethan watched the whole thing with a blank expression before looking away. The woman who had been harassing him finally realized Ava was standing right above them. She suddenly looked very uncomfortable. "Oh, hi Ava," she said with a forced laugh. "I was just catching up with Ethan over a drink. Please don't get the wrong idea." Ava leaned into me, making sure everyone saw her. She looked down at the woman with a gaze that could freeze boiling water. "Misunderstand what exactly?" she asked coldly. "He is here doing low-rent work. So what is there to even talk about?" she continued. I was honestly stunned by how cruel she could be. Her mouth was like a weapon designed to hurt people. I immediately looked at Ethan. He was perfectly still, but I could see his jaw clenching so hard it looked like it might snap. Being humiliated like that in front of everyone was worse than any insult. Most men wouldn't be able to just stand there and take that kind of disrespect. I leaned in and whispered to Ava, "Look at him. He's clearly upset. Let's just drop it." Ava didn't even flinch. "He shouldn't have come to a place like this in the first place," she replied. I was so over her attitude. I stepped back, realizing there was no reasoning with her tonight. If I didn't do something, this was going to turn into a full-blown disaster. I was trying to figure out a way to break them up when the crowd downstairs started cheering. I looked down and saw Ethan down his drink in one shot. The people around him started hooting and hollering, and Ava's face turned a brilliant shade of crimson. Ethan slammed the glass down, his voice like dry ice. "There, I drank it. Are we done now?" The woman clearly wasn't finished with him. She leaned in, looking even more amused by his anger. "Just one? Don't be so cheap, Ethan. Everyone knows you can handle way more than that." I took a deep breath and called out, "Mr. Brooks." Every eye in the club turned toward me, the atmosphere practically buzzing with the promise of drama. This was the first time Ava's two love interests had been in the same room together. No matter what I said, people would be talking about this for weeks. "James, stop it," Ava hissed. I ignored her and smiled down at Ethan. "We have that meeting tomorrow to go over your designs, remember? If you get hammered tonight, we won't get any work done tomorrow." I didn't even look at Ava as I headed down to the main floor. I walked right up to Ethan and asked, "Did you drive yourself? If not, my driver can give you a lift home." Ethan gave me a complicated look and started to say no, but he suddenly doubled over, clutching his chest in agony. "What is it? What's wrong?" I asked, panicked. The woman just rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, please, one drink doesn't do that. Stop being so dramatic." A second later, Ethan collapsed. I caught him before he hit the floor, his face turning a terrifying shade of gray. "Ethan, talk to me, what's happening?" I didn't wait around. "Someone call 911. I screamed. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ava lose all her composure as she practically flew down the stairs. "Ethan," she screamed. I had forgotten that Ethan's heart condition was a major plot point in the book. I sat on a bench in the hospital hallway and let out a long, weary sigh. In the original story, he was supposed to have this heart attack right before he went to jail after a massive blowout with Ava. I thought by keeping him out of prison I could save him from this, but I guess some things are just destined to happen. I glanced over at Ava, who looked like she was in total shock. She was just sitting there staring at nothing, completely unresponsive. She had no clue about his condition. If we hadn't been there to call for help, he might have died right there on the club floor. Maria finally stepped out of the patient room and looked toward me. "James," she said softly. I stood up and nodded. Maria gave me a long look before speaking. "He is awake now, and he asked for you." I was floored. "He wanted to see me?" I couldn't believe I was the first person he wanted to see instead of Ava. Ava had already bolted to her feet, ready to rush into his room. When she heard Maria's words, she froze in her tracks. Her face twisted into that classic, entitled scowl she always used when she didn't get her way. She gave Maria a look that could kill, clearly suspecting the doctor was lying just to keep her away from Ethan. But Maria was the one in charge here, and even Ava knew better than to start a screaming match in a hospital. It was beneath her. I ignored Ava's drama and just nodded at Maria. "Thanks, I will go talk to him." Ethan looked incredibly fragile as he lay there, his skin almost translucent. He slowly turned his head when he heard me enter. He looked utterly defeated, like all the life had been drained out of him. I sat down next to the bed, trying to think of something helpful to say. "Modern medicine is pretty amazing these days," I told him. "There are great treatments for heart conditions like yours. If you start now, you will be back on your feet in no time." Ethan was quiet for a long time before he spoke. "Actually, I just wanted to say thank you. You were the only person in that room who stood up for me tonight." I didn't know what to say. After being humiliated like that, and then nearly dying, he must have been going through hell. It was a lot for anyone to handle. It was even worse knowing Ava had just stood by and watched it happen like she didn't even know him. "Listen, man," I said honestly, "that woman is not worth literal heart failure. You deserve better." Ethan looked stunned to hear that coming from me. He gave a sad, self-deprecating laugh. "She doesn't love me, James. That's why she treats me like garbage." "But she loves you," he continued. "She would do anything for you." I was just an idiot to think she ever actually cared about me. I shook my head. "She doesn't love me either, Ethan. Women like Ava don't actually know how to love people. They just know how to possess them. The only person Ava Sterling truly loves is herself," I said. Ethan looked confused. "But she has been obsessed with you since you were kids." I shrugged. "If she loved me that much, why was she so quick to ask you to go to prison for me? Does that sound like love to you? If she really wanted to protect the person she loved, she would have stepped up herself. She wouldn't have dragged an innocent man down to save me." Ethan was stunned into silence. I don't think he had ever looked at it from that perspective before, and he couldn't find a single word to argue with me. I patted his arm. "Believe what you want, but staying with a woman like that is only going to lead to more pain. You have too much talent and potential to waste it on her. There are plenty of other women in the world, so don't throw your life away on one toxic socialite." Ethan grew quiet, lost in thought. He had been in love with her for 4 long years, and no matter how much she hurt him, he couldn't seem to break away. At this point, his devotion was more like a reflex than a choice. I knew he wouldn't change his mind overnight, and that was okay. But the truth was that the more he let her walk all over him, the less she would ever respect him. I wasn't expecting a miracle. I just wanted to plant a seed of doubt in his mind. When his floor was almost empty, I stood up. "I'll go find a nurse to unhook you," I said. Maria walked in with a nurse, and Ava was right on her heels. As soon as she got into the room, she grabbed my arm. "James, what did he say to you? Was he rude to you?" she demanded, looking at Ethan as if he were a dangerous animal. She seemed to have forgotten that the man was literally in a hospital bed recovering from a heart attack. I was actually starting to feel sorry for him. Ethan just closed his eyes, clearly done with her. I pulled my hand away from her and said calmly, "He needs rest, Ava. Let's let him sleep." Ava just stood there, rooted to the spot. I wanted to laugh. She was acting like she didn't care, but she couldn't bring herself to leave him. She was still obsessed with him, but was too proud to ever apologize for her behavior. Ethan really had the worst luck in the world falling for someone like her. After the nurse unhooked the four, Maria stepped up to the bed and looked at him with soft, caring eyes. "Here, Ethan, have some water," she said gently. She helped him sit up and handed him the glass. Ethan managed a weak smile and said, "Thanks, Maria." Maria smiled back. "You need to take better care of yourself. You know how much your mother worries about you." She was clearly talking about his mom, and knowing Maria, she wasn't the type to play games or be manipulative. But to Ava, it sounded like a direct challenge. She lunged forward, shoved Maria aside, and slapped her right across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the room. "Don't you dare touch him!" Ava screamed. I was absolutely floored by her behavior. It was insane. She treated him like dirt, but as soon as someone else showed him kindness, she lost her mind. This wasn't love. It was just a sick, obsessive need for control. It wasn't about romance at all. She was just lashing out. Maria was caught completely off guard, her cheek turning bright red immediately. Ethan's eyes widened in horror. "Maria, Ava, what is wrong with you?" he yelled. His outburst only made things worse. Ava just sneered at him and said, "She's the one you really want, isn't she?" Ethan looked like he was about to explode. "What are you even talking about?" he demanded. Maria quickly put a hand on his shoulder to calm him down, worried his heart wouldn't be able to take the stress. "Ethan, it's okay. I'm fine," Maria whispered, though the mark on her face told a very different story. When Ava saw Maria's hand on his shoulder, she completely lost it. "So you two have been sleeping together this whole time, behind my back." I was honestly horrified. I have read a lot of bad romance, but this level of insanity was something else entirely. I felt embarrassed for my entire gender in that moment. Ethan was shaking with rage. "Ava, watch your mouth." Ava seemed to realize she had gone too far. A flicker of regret crossed her face, and she took a small step toward him as if she wanted to take it back. But her pride won out, and she stayed silent. Ethan took a long, shaky breath and pointed toward the door. "Get out," he said. "I never want to see you again for as long as I live." His voice was so calm, it was actually chilling. Ava started to panic. "Ethan, please, I didn't mean it like that. That's enough." "Ava," I interrupted. I stepped between them, feeling like a soldier walking into a minefield. "He needs to sleep, and you've had a long day. Let me take you home." Ava looked torn, but she finally realized that staying would only make her look worse. She hesitated for a second before finally following me out. We didn't say a single word to each other the entire drive back to her place. She seemed completely lost in her own thoughts about Ethan. I pulled up to her house in Greenwich and was about to tell her we were there when she suddenly spoke up. "James, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice sounding strangely determined. She looked at me and said, "I have realized the truth. Ethan is the one I really love, so I think we should break up." I kept a straight face, but inside I was screaming. I just wanted to tell her to leave that poor man alone. He had already suffered enough because of her, and nobody wanted her version of true love. She should have been focusing on her failing business instead of her love life. She was so obsessed with romance that I wondered if she even remembered she had a company to run. Even the biggest fortune in the world won't last if the person in charge is this reckless. I looked down for a second and then let out a sigh, making sure I sounded relieved. "Okay, Ava, if that is what you want, then I won't stand in your way." As soon as she was gone, I pulled out my phone and texted Ethan. I told him that Ava had officially ended things with me and was likely headed his way, so he should have his doctors keep her out if he didn't want to see her. His reply came almost instantly, and it was colder than I expected. He said she was nothing to him now, so it didn't even matter if he saw her or not. I could practically feel the ice through the screen. He was definitely not the same man who used to follow Ava around like a lost puppy. While I was typing a response, another message popped up. He wanted to know if my job offer was still on the table. A month later, Ethan started his first day at my firm. She hadn't even made it to 5 o'clock before a delivery person showed up with an incredibly fancy, over-the-top bento box. It was from Ava, of course. Just looking at the ridiculously elaborate presentation made me feel exhausted for him. Here we go again with the classic obsessed ex-girlfriend trope. It is a staple in every trashy romance novel ever written. My presence had shifted the timeline, forcing Ava to speed up her character arc and jump straight into the part where she tries to win back the man she already destroyed. Some of my staff were whispering about it near the break room. "That lunch looks amazing, but is it just me, or does it smell a little burnt?" one of them asked. Her friend nudged her hard. "Are you crazy?" Ava Sterling made that herself. "You better keep your mouth shut." They all looked toward my office nervously. I just shook my head in disbelief. Everyone in the building knew that Ava and I were done. She wasn't even trying to hide the fact that she was chasing Ethan now. If you didn't know the history, you would think she was just trying to embarrass me. Those of us who knew the truth just felt sorry for her. It was clear she had completely lost her grip on reality. When I walked out of my office, the group of gossipers immediately scrambled back to their desks, murmuring nervous greetings as I passed. They pretended to be busy, but I knew they were all listening intently to see what would happen next. I ignored the tension and just glanced at the lunchbox on Ethan's desk. Ethan looked incredibly awkward. "Sorry about this, James. I'll get rid of it right now." "You're not even going to try it?" I asked. He just gave me a firm nod. He had moved on from her a long time ago, and he wasn't about to be won over by a burnt lunch and some fancy packaging. "Do whatever you want with it," I said casually. For the next month, Ava had a meal delivered to the office every single day without fail. She didn't make even an inch of progress with him. Meanwhile, the design projects Ethan was leading were becoming a massive success for the firm. Our revenue was through the roof, and everyone was so busy that nobody had time to care about Ava's desperate romantic gestures anymore. Watching our profits climb made me feel incredible. It just goes to show that focusing on your career is always the right move. Ethan seemed to have found his purpose, and he was happily putting in long hours at the office. He had completely ghosted Ava, ignoring every single text, call, and apology she sent. Eventually, Ava grew tired of being ignored. One afternoon, she showed up at the building in person. I knew the second she arrived because everyone in the office recognized her distinct white Bentley. Just 2 months ago, that car was coming by every day to pick me up for dinner. Now she was there for Ethan. My coworkers were giving me these incredibly awkward looks, clearly feeling embarrassed for me. I didn't care at all. In fact, I was kind of looking forward to the drama. The weather report had predicted a massive thunderstorm for this afternoon. I wondered if she was planning a dramatic confession in the rain like some scene from a movie. I have to admit, I always did enjoy a good show. I joined my coworkers at the window to watch the scene below. The rain was coming down in sheets, making her expensive car look completely out of place in the middle of the storm. Then Ava stepped out into the downpour. Ethan was still at his desk working on a project, and he didn't even look up when his phone buzzed with a notification. She must have tried calling him once and given up when he didn't answer. Then she actually threw her umbrella aside and just stood there, getting completely soaked. The entire office let out a collective gasp. "Ethan, I think someone is here to see you," one of the designers called out. "You really need to see this." Ethan looked annoyed as he walked over to the window. As soon as he saw her, he scowled. "Are you going to go down there?" I asked. Ethan didn't even hesitate. "Call the police," he said flatly. "She's been stalking me for weeks, and I am done with it." I tried to ignore her, but now she is blocking the entrance to my workplace, he continued. "This has gone way too far." A few coworkers nodded in support. Yeah, nobody needs that kind of drama in their life. If she's willing to embarrass herself like this now, imagine what she would do if she was actually angry at you. He already told her he's not interested. If she wants to stand in the rain like a crazy person, that's on her, someone else added. "It is just pathetic. She is standing out there in a hurricane for you," I said. "You don't feel anything at all?" Ethan's voice was like ice. "If she gets sick, she can take an aspirin. It's not my problem." "It isn't like she is out there with a broken leg," he finished. I gave him a mental high five for that one. "Oh, I almost forgot," Ethan said. "Maria's mom made her famous ribs tonight and invited us over for some drinks. You in?" "I'm definitely in," I replied. I had my driver bring the car around to the garage exit so Ethan and I could head out. As we pulled out of the driveway, we drove right past Ava. She saw me first, and then her eyes landed on Ethan in the passenger seat. She looked completely confused as to why the two of us were together in the same car. But she quickly remembered why she was there in the first place. She wiped the rain from her eyes and screamed at Ethan through the glass. I know I messed up. Just give me one more chance. I slowed the car down for a second and looked at her. The powerful, untouchable Ava Sterling was now standing in the mud, looking like a drowned rat. Are you really not going to say anything to her? I asked. Ethan thought about it for a second and then cracked the window just an inch. We are late for dinner, he said clearly. So please get out of the way of the car. He rolled the window back up immediately as if he were afraid of letting the rain inside. Ava stood there as if she had been turned to stone. My driver hit the gas, and the tires sent a massive wave of dirty street water right over her expensive outfit. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw her standing there in the rain, looking completely lost. She clearly had no idea how her perfect life had fallen apart so quickly. I glanced at my phone and saw a notification that Ethan had just won a prestigious National Design Award. Congrats, Ethan. You're officially a star, I said. We should definitely celebrate tonight, I added. Ethan laughed. You're the guest of honor, James. We're going to have a great night. Ava went off the radar for a long time after that. Rumor had it that she had ended up in the hospital with a severe case of pneumonia. Eventually, the gossip shifted to her business. Apparently, the Sterling Group was in serious financial trouble. The vultures in the industry were already circling her company. As soon as she showed weakness, everyone she had ever stepped on came back for revenge. But I guess she was still the protagonist of her own story in some way. It took her 6 months to get things under control again, but the damage was already done. The Sterling Empire was a shadow of its former self and was clearly on the decline. I didn't waste any time taking over the market share they lost. With Ethan leading our creative team, my firm grew so fast that we eventually left the Sterlings in the dust. When Ethan and Maria finally got married, I was proud to stand by his side as his best man. It was a beautiful wedding in the Hamptons, and the whole place was filled with genuine happiness. I was having a great time, truly happy for my friend. Toward the end of the night, I spotted a familiar face in the back of the crowd. It was Ava. She looked exhausted and worn out. None of that old high society sparkle left in her eyes. I looked away after a second. Ethan and Maria were up on the stage, exchanging their vows and rings. As the guests cheered, they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. Ava couldn't watch anymore and turned to leave, looking defeated and alone. I raised my glass and toasted to the happy couple. Congratulations, Ethan. I'm so happy for you, I said. It turns out that when you find the right person, love actually is a pretty great thing after all. After waking up inside the novel, the very first thing James Harrison did was head to the police station to turn himself in. He was not doing it because he wanted to be a saint, but because he refused to be the kind of villain who lets the hero go to prison in his place. He recruited Ethan Brooks to join his firm, made sure all his medical bills were covered, and even helped him find a woman who actually deserved his love. Once you stop following a predestined script, you finally see that there is no rule saying you have to live your life according to someone else's plan. Romance should never be about charity or guilt, and it definitely is not about standing in the pouring rain just to convince yourself that you are a martyr. Genuine love is when two people move forward together as a team, rather than one person dragging the other down to the bottom of the ocean. Before you try to find the right partner, you first have to learn how to stop being a puppet for everyone else.